Okay, as it's already 6 p.m., we will start now. I would like to welcome you all to the Hague Debate Tournament, the quarterfinals. My name is Sophia. I will be the host for this evening, and together with Zadi, who will be taking care of the timekeeping. First, I would like to introduce you to the judges for this match. That is going to be Dr. De La Cuesta de los Mozos, who is presently in the match, I believe. Good evening. And Dr. Kostikovic and Ms. Marassi, who might join or might watch the recording later. The two teams debating in this match are the legal conundrum, which is Anugo Vetira and Rumitai, and the team 1964 with Astrid and Jasmine. I welcome you all here, and I hope you will enjoy this debate. Here, I would also like to remind you that this is an elimination round, which means that the team that receives the lower score in this match will be eliminated. The topic of this match is the following. States candidates to become members of the European Union must receive a deadline by which a decision will be provided by the European Union. Now I will share my screen and use the randomizer to decide which team is going to be in favor of the statement and which team is going to argue against the topic. Just give me a second. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so Legal Conundrum will argue in favor of the statement and the team 1964 will be against. Before we start, I would like to remind you that this match has a bit of a different format in comparison to the last match that you took part in terms of the timing per speech. In this match, you have 4 minutes for your opening speeches, 2 minutes per member in the rebuttal phase, and 2 minutes for your closing speeches. Are we all clear, and can we start the 5 minutes for you to prepare?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Then I'll ask Zadi to start the 5-minute timer, and then we can start. Thank you.
Hi, actually, I had a quick question, if that's okay. We were kind of confused with Yasmin about how long the opening statement is, because in the workshop they said 4 minutes, and the email it says 2 minutes, and now again 4 minutes, and we're not completely sure how much time does each team have.
I'm sorry if the email it said 2 minutes. If that was the case, that was our mistake. In this match, it's 4 minutes for the opening statement.
For each team, right?
Yes, it's 4 minutes for the pro team and 4 minutes for the con team.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. It's just in case you haven't seen it, you're not looking at the screen, you have 1 minute remaining. And the preparation time is up. I would now like to invite the pro team to present their opening speech.
Good evening. Before I start, am I seen and heard? Great. Good evening. My name is Anuga Kantox, and together with my colleagues Petira Rukoro and Rumbita Mutongo, I will be representing the proposition. Now, imagine law school without any deadlines. You would know what the deliverables are, but you would never know when to provide these. It is left to your own discretion when to submit assignments and when to have the group meetings to discuss tasks. How likely is it that the technique will be effective and result in the best success of law students in the legal faculty? It is not very likely. This is what currently is happening to recognized state candidates for membership of the EU, such as Turkey, Albania, and North Macedonia. This is why the EU needs deadlines. This notion is already included in the fundamental legislation of the EU, namely Article 294, Section 12. Here it is said that if within 6 weeks of it being convened, the Conciliation Committee does not approve the joint text, the proposed act shall be deemed not to have been adopted, showing that the reason why the European Union needs deadlines is to ensure effectiveness and implementation. A comparison can be drawn to the Paris Agreement on climate change. This agreement sets a deadline that was given to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change. This allows a more concentrated approach of the achievement of the set goals. You see two stakeholders, the member states and the agreement itself. Transferring this to the current debate, these stakeholders are the negotiating states and the EU as an institution. These two stakeholders have to work together for the success of the European enlargement and the EU. When states apply for the accession to the European Union, they first have to fulfill the Copenhagen criteria in order to be let into the EU, set out in Article 49 TFU. They have to include that the state's institutions must guarantee the respect of democracy, rule of law, human rights, and protection of minorities. They must have a functioning market economy and the ability to cope with competitive and market forces within the EU. And they have to apply, and the applying states have to take on the obligation of membership and hereby effectively implement the rules, standards, and policies of the EU and adhere to the aims of the political, economic, and monetary union. As said, states must take decisions in the light of EU, even though they are not benefiting yet from the EU integrated community. Giving deadlines to these states gives them a reason to work towards this goal. However, if these are not given, then they are working towards something without a promise being given to them. This is an insecure and unstable position. In the example of Turkey, they have been waiting for years, since 1997, and this has been frozen since 2006. In order to maintain the momentum of the EU, and also in the interest of the Union's capacity to absorb new members, and for the momentum of the European integration, this is a very important consideration. And by putting a deadline, it is clear for the EU how to ease into this expansion. Therefore, we, as the proposition, believe that state candidates who are recognized as candidates for membership of the European Union must receive a deadline by which a decision by the EU will be provided. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite the Con team to present their opening speech.
Thank you. Can everyone see me and hear me? Thank you. Good evening, jurors, timekeeper, and the opposing team. My name is Jasmine Hogendijk, and together with Astrid Overwijs, we do not believe that the candidate states must receive a deadline from the European Union on which they reach a decision. For us, this statement would make the entire accession process harder and would come with more problems than advantages. Furthermore, this statement gives more of an idea that this process contains only one party instead of also recognizing that the candidate states would suffer from this. Setting a deadline in general comes with a lot of issues. If a dispute arises, this may not be managed in time. Additionally, in the situation, new policy would have to be made to regulate what would happen if a deadline would not be adhered by the European Union. In practice, with some exceptions, accession to the EU has taken little under 5 years. But again, there are two sides to this case. The EU would be affected to the part where they have to look at the current state and affairs of the candidate. However, the effect of the candidate state would be a lot bigger and should definitely be kept in mind. The duration of an accession is mainly influenced by the current country's political will and its ability to reform. Reforming a state to adhere to the criteria and values of the European Union with possible political internal conflict, as we know happens a lot in most member states with the different political parties that they have, would most likely lead to the refusals. Next to all of that, all the other member states in the European Union must be agreed during the accession procedure on whether or not this country should be part of the EU. Which is exactly why setting a deadline would be impractical, and it would be better for this process to take as long as necessary. There's no need to rush a process that has a big influence on the parties involved. Lastly, we have seen it in the entire Brexit process that a deadline does not work. The original deadline for the United Kingdom to leave the European Union was set on 29th of March of 2019. After some political conflict within the United Kingdom and an inability of the European Union and the United Kingdom to reach for a Brexit agreement, the deadline was postponed to 31st of January 2020. The flexibility of this deadline was not useful to anything since initially it was not adhered. It was altered. If this would happen during the accession procedure, the entire principle of this deadline would fall apart. This is exactly why we believe the European does not have to give a deadline to the candidate states as a deadline which they give a decision regarding the accession of said state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would now like to hear the first rebuttal speech of the Pro team.
Right. Before I speak, am I audible and visible? Great. Honorable judges, our counterparts today would like to state that the issue that we're dealing with today is too complex for it to be resolved in a set time period. However, I'll give you two reasons why that is not true in today's debate and why we can still set a deadline that is effective. Firstly, we tell you that because of the complexities and political issues that they've raised today, those issues that do not necessarily limit the idea of a due date. We then cite to this the climate change agreement. Climate change is something that is very intricate and deals with a lot of complexities, most of which are still not understood. However, in this agreement, people still understood that it is necessary to have a timeline because this allows for a more concrete and a process of actions to be taken in order to achieve the goals. We find that this is still true in today's debate, and we find that they will then make the achievements more attainable. Over and above that, the process being long is not a problem also, because for the second point is that the length of the process can also be tailored to the specific state. We see that in the process of the EU, there is already this idea that different procedures will take different length. If we look at the special legislative procedure, ordinary legislative procedures, they all have different lengths, but they still all have a due date. This is the same principle that we want to draw from Article 294 of the EU, and then re-implement it then to the EU accession, and see that there is a way in which they can all coincide. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to hear the first rebuttal speech from the Con team.
Also, before I start, am I seen, heard? Okay, perfect. So good evening. My name is Astrolina Overwijs, and together with Ismina Hogedijk, we believe that states candidates to become members of the EU should not receive a deadline by which a decision will be provided by the EU. I will start addressing some of the arguments that the opposite team has proposed today. Firstly, I would like to address the comparison with the law students and having a deadline, and also the comparison with the Paris Agreement, considering that they are inaccurate analogies. Even considering a deadline for an exam also depends on a different person that needs to set the deadline by a university. However, even if there was no deadline, as is proven by different universities in different countries, even if you don't have a deadline, what is the motivation to continue? The fact that you will get something out of it in the end. That's why the candidate member states should be working towards accession even without a deadline. They should be working towards accession because it is convenient for them, it's convenient for the union. That takes me to my second point, which would be that what was stated before, a deadline would definitely hinder negotiations, considering that this is not a situation in which you can set a deadline in which a state can or cannot fill the criteria, the situation of criteria. Here we have the examples of the WHO and NATO, that they do not have deadlines considering they have a criteria set and they cannot determine when a member state will themselves meet the criteria. And it's the same situation within the EU with the Copenhagen criteria. There is no way the union can know when a member state will reach the values that are established by the Copenhagen criteria. Therefore, it's completely impossible to set an accurate deadline. Further, if we were to set a deadline separate for each particular country, that would also be not according to the principle of actually setting a deadline in itself, because why would you set a deadline if it's in any ways it's going to be depending on each situation, it's going to be on a case-by-case basis. And how do you determine that deadline? Is it a political discussion? Is it a cultural discussion? Is it an economic discussion? Who decides how much time does each country get? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite Conundrum for the second rebuttal speech.
Hello, am I audible and visible? Okay, thank you. Good evening. I would like to rebut the third point that was made, that Brexit did not work because a deadline was set. Brexit did not work because it was a conflict of interest between the two parties negotiating. This was a breakdown of negotiations, not because there was a deadline, but because the parties could not agree on what was needed. To say that a deadline does not work is to say that Brexit did not work because there was a deadline is to say that the negotiations succeeded, but because the deadline didn't work is wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I would like to invite 1964 for their second rebuttal speech.
Also, again, hello. My name is Astrolina Overwijs. I welcome for the second speech. Wanted to address further the previous argument from the pro team that we should make use of the momentum for EU integration. What exactly is this momentum? The EU has been very slowly building up as an organization for many, many years. So I don't think there is a specific time. The union is based on the values of democracy, as said in the TEU. So it is not a matter of time. It's a matter of quality of the rights that are provided for the citizens. Why should the EU allow accession or integration to the internal market with the economic benefits of being part of the EU If the candidate member state cannot assure the European Union that they will provide the rights the rights to the citizens as according to the TEU and the values of the Union, there is absolutely no obligation for the Union to accept a state that will not comply with their values, as is established in the treaties. Therefore, we cannot establish that these candidates have to be accepted as a member in a definite period of time. Further, the opposite team said that the process being long is not something that should hinder a deadline. Well, if the process being long is not something that should hinder a deadline, what's the need for the deadline in the first place? At the end of the day, this is about a state meeting a certain type of criteria, and it is not something that can be limited. It is a gradual process that takes time, therefore cannot be limited by a deadline or rushed. If it's rushed, we're rushing democracy, we're rushing the rule of law, we're rushing people's rights. Do we want to rush it, or do we want to do it properly? Do we want to only ascertain this level of accession to the EU once these values are met? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, Lieke Conundrum, you have the floor for your last rebuttal speech.
Again, I am still visible and audible. Right. Honorable judges, our counterparts today are trying to push the narrative that it is too complex a situation to be resolved by a deadline. And they have cited to this who will decide when this will be and how long this process will take. However, we tell you that already the process that is in place today is a state-by-state process where it is derived or decided on an individual state basis. So if one state requires more time in order for all the complexities of that state to be taken into consideration, then that is done. This is why Turkey from 1987 still has not acceded to the EU. We see that this will still remain true. It's just that there will be a decision and a deadline on this. We also have cited that they are trying to say that we will then allow for states to come in that are not necessarily upholding the EU rights and morals. This is again also not true, because the accession to the EU is cited in Article 49 of the TFEU, and in that it says that all the lists of Articles 2, all the mandates in it should be upheld. Therefore, there is no way for a state that doesn't uphold this and the Copenhagen Agreement to then be acceded into the EU. That is not in the scope of today's debate. We find that today's debate should strictly be about whether it is more efficient to do so. And we find that, yes, it is more efficient when there is a deadline. Again, we cite the Climate Change Agreement. In this agreement, it is dealing with complex situations that could lead to the end of our entire nation, our entire global citizenship and life. And we find that in this complex situation, there is still deadlines for this, even though we're not quite sure how we're going to deal with it all. This is because we've cited that there is a need to have efficiency and a more concentrated action plan. And this is what deadlines do. For all of these reasons, ladies and gentlemen, for all of these reasons, dear judges, we see that it is important to maintain deadlines for the EU to ensure that there is concentrated action towards the rule of law, towards democracy, and to making the state better. For all of that, we thank you.
Thank you, Team 1964. Now is your time for the last rebuttal speech.
Thank you very much. I will start with the last rebuttal speech. I would like to address further the last arguments made by the opposite team. Firstly, that we are here to discuss whether a deadline would be more efficient. Not only do we believe that a deadline would not be efficient, we believe it would 100% hinder the negotiations and the possibility of accession for some countries to the EU. Further, we want to build up on that. You cannot expect a country to manage a certain growth of democratic values within its society and within its culture in a limited period of time. You cannot time that. Therefore, you cannot set a deadline in which these countries will accede. If we do set that deadline, which would probably result in a no, and which would result in less countries having access to the EU, which would go against the values and the principles as mentioned by the opposite team in Article 49 of the TEU. Article 49 of the TEU established that any European state which respects the values referred to in Article 2 shall be applicable for accession. if those values are referred, if these values are respected, therefore can a state apply for accession. Further, the consistent and constant referral to the Paris Agreement, I would like to mention that the growth of democracy is not as fast as the climate change and the global warming crisis. The global warming crisis does need some immediate action. However, you cannot rush the growth of democracy of an entire culture and a society. That will take a really long time to have a collective consciousness to grow into this sense. There is absolutely no way. Further, we have the example of Turkey, as mentioned by the opposite team. Turkey has not acceded to the EU not for lack of deadline, but for lack of compliance with the Copenhagen criteria. The EU has made that very clear because as they have mentioned before, negotiations have been frozen since 2018, and this process has been very long. However, the EU has been negotiating and they have been trying. But if Turkey does not meet the values, then it's not on the union to dismiss what's stated in the treaty. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to invite the Conundrum for their conclusive statement.
Thank you. Am I audible and visible? Okay, thank you. To rebut these final points and bring this debate to a conclusion, we would like to first of all further restate that a rejected state can still reapply to become a member state. Therefore, we as the proposition would like to firmly restate and conclude our argument that a member state must be given a deadline by which a decision would be provided by the European Union. Firstly, as my colleague stated, the EU itself needs to have deadlines to be able to take into account the myriad of actions and decisions that need to be taken when a new state joins. For example, the climate agreement has a deadline because it has multiple actions that need to be taken to achieve its goals within the time it had set for itself. Secondly, for states to be able to join the European Union, they need to take certain steps and make certain decisions that are in the best interest of the EU, without any guarantee that they will become a member state. And this is often done against the best interest of their own people. So there should be a deadline so that they know that their actions are not in vain. Lastly, for the EU's own benefit, having a deadline would ensure that their work goes on smoothly because they know who and what to take into consideration in their future work, because they are aware of what state is joining, if any are joining. Therefore, in conclusion, state candidates must receive a deadline because it leads to the effectiveness of achieving these goals and ensures a consistency in the EU's momentum of their work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Team 1964, now the floor is yours for your concluded statement.
Yes, am I visible and audible? Thank you. As the closing statement, we want to reiterate that deadlines in the current context would be impractical. Negotiations and reforms take time and should not be rushed just because a decision should be made. Informed, not because the deadlines was set before the process even started. Also, deadlines are under tension all the time. If they keep being moved, why would we have them in the first place? To come again towards the climate change agreements from the opposing team, we do not deny that these are not important, but the deadlines set have been questioned over the last few years. It has been a topic of discussion that these deadlines might be moved because countries have failed to follow the steps they need to follow. But this debate is about accession, not climate change. It is clear in the constituent treaties that this is accession is a matter of fulfilling criteria and not just negotiations. That's why we stand by our position that the European Union must not give candidate states a deadline on which they give a decision regarding their accession to the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for this debate. Now I would like to invite our one present judge to provide some brief feedback, if she would like to.
Thank you very much. I will be very brief. I want to thank the two teams because I am quite impressed with your performance, with the depth of the arguments that you have used, with the respect with which you have treated the other team, and presented your ideas in a clear and concise manner. So congratulations to both of you. I think that one of the most difficult things to manage in this type of exercise is time. When you see that red signpost, you try to say it all at the same time. For future exercises, I would recommend that you choose your battles and you choose what bones to chew. So you can really focus your arguments and make sure that the final message that arrives or reaches the audience is clear, concise, and goes to the point. With this said, I insist it has been a pleasure to be here today, and I really congratulate you for your performance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your feedback. And with this, we can conclude the match. As you all know, you will be informed about the results by email as soon as we manage to process them. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you very much for your participation today, and have a nice evening.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, organizers and fellow combatants.
You too.